Alrighty, good morning, everybody. We're just opening up the meeting now, giving you a moment to settle in here. Let me just admit the folks in the waiting room. All right. So hello, everyone. And on behalf of Space, welcome to this panel discussion focused on getting to zero waste at Concordia. A warm welcome to all of our panelists who will be introduced very shortly. But before we get to that bit, I just wanted to welcome you to our virtual channel. For those of you unfamiliar with Concordia's Space, we are physically located on unceded Indigenous land in downtown Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And we operate as a university-wide platform to activate research, teaching, and initiatives so as to connect the public with the inner workings of a university in terms of the very many ideas, projects, and cross-disciplinary ventures that are brewing inside of labs, studios, and classrooms. So I'll just note that we are recording this meeting and streaming this event, and I'll pop those links into the chat in a minute. We've done away with the webinar vibe for this workshop-style conversation, as you can already see if you're here with us, really in order to allow you, all of you who took the time to join us here from your little Zoom box to ours, to engage. So please do raise your hand or your virtual hand if you have questions or comments and you'd like to participate in the conversation. Of course, the chat box is open for all if you're more of a texter. And on that note, it's my pleasure to pass things over to Sustainability Coordinator Cassandra Lamontagne. Hi there.
Hi, Anna. Thanks so much. Great. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to learn about the Zero Waste Plan at Concordia. The Zero Waste Plan is one of the streams in Concordia's Sustainability Action Plan, which we launched this past fall in November. And so this is actually the third event in a series of panel discussions designed to invite our community to familiarize themselves with the Sustainability Action Plan and also engage with the people who helped develop the plan and who are going to be pushing it forward and putting it into action at Concordia. So this event series is organized by the Office of Sustainability in collaboration with the Concordia Student Union. And so far we've held panels around the climate plan and the sustainability and research plan. Both of those were held in March. And in fall, we will be holding events around the food and curriculum streams of the plan. And all of these will be available at Concordia's website, the Space website, sorry, and through the Sustainability Action Plan webpage, which I'll put in the chat in just a moment. So you can definitely explore any of the ones that you've missed, and we'll be sending around the registration link to you for the next one, since you're here today, you're interested in the Sustainability Action Plan, and we'll be looping you into the next set of events as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Meredith Martinduda, who's holding her adorable dog right now, who works in the Office of Sustainability as our Sustainability Ambassadors Coordinator, and who is going to be moderating today's event. It's going to be an excellent discussion with really great panelists, so I hope that everybody enjoys it.
Thanks so much, Cassandra. Yes, this is Katia. She loves to sit on my lap while I do Zoom, so she'll be joining us for a little bit as well. And I hope all of you are comfortable in your homes, in your workspaces. If you have a pet, hopefully he's in your lap, or you have a good mug of coffee. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to sort of make this conversation together. We've been really lucky in terms of developing zero waste on campus to have had so many collaborations. So that's why today is more of a conversation than a webinar. We really want to be continuing that work and principle that feels really foundational to how we're moving forward with the waste stream. So I'm going to start by giving some quick introductions to our panelists. First being Faisal Sheneb, who is the environmental specialist in facilities management and leads the Zero Waste program at Concordia. So he coordinated the Zero Waste Plan Drafting Committee, and we're very lucky to have him here to really be giving us a cohesive context to what the stream plan looks like. And I also want to introduce Ariane Weeks, who is the material and tool literacy coordinator in facilities management and leads the Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse, also called SUCCR. He participated in the Zero Waste Plan Drafting Committee, which has been super helpful. And we also want to introduce Alice Jerry, an assistant professor in design and computation arts, and who is conducting research on recycling and upcycling processed glass. Our final panelist today is Liz Miller. She's a professor in communication studies and offers a class conducting a bike tour of waste management sites in Montreal, which I have not taken, but I've heard some very, very cool things about. So I'm looking forward to hearing more. And we'll do that today. We're going to start off with sort of the basic question to our panelists, which is, how do you define sustainability for yourself? And what have you been doing to support the zero waste stream of Concordia's new sustainability action plan? So I'm going to actually ask Faisal to start us off with that question so he can really help walk us through the context of what's already been done for the plan and where we're heading.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. So yeah, my name is Faisal. I work as the environmental specialist at Concordia. I've been working on projects mostly around waste management for around, well, now over 10 years. I used to say around 10 years. Now I have to start saying more than 10 years. I helped develop this plan over many years. And so I'm going to share my screen and actually talk a little bit about how this plan came to be. And as Meredith alluded to, it's really a community-driven plan and has been and will continue to be, I hope. So let me get this in presentation mode. Bear with me. For some reason, it takes me forever to start presentations. I don't know why. I'm not that slow with computers, but with this stuff, absolutely, I'm super slow. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint? Great. Little miracles. Okay. So what we're talking about when we talk about waste, I think it's important to have that context because we could be talking about a lot of different things, but we're going to talk about what most people are talking about, which is material waste. So solid waste, not water waste right now, not energy waste, although those are things that Concordia is concerned about and does have plans for. When we talk about material waste, we're also mostly talking about non-hazardous waste because that's stuff that there is more of an opportunity to do something with, although that isn't necessarily out of scope entirely. So most of what we've got at Concordia in terms of continuously generated materials are organics. We've got packaging. We've got lots of paper because we're a university that prints a lot. We've got electronics. And we've also got lots of different kinds of supplies and materials. And I'm not going to go too much in detail in terms of the history, but I did want to quickly share this timeline just to point out that this stuff has been happening for a long time at Concordia. And so for those of you who have been around for a little bit, you'll recognize some of these milestones and landmarks. Heading back into the 90s, before I was around, we built off of basically a campus sustainability assessment that was conducted in the early 2000s, where we started doing waste audits, really digging into how well we were doing in terms of what we were sending into our trash. And we discovered there were a lot of opportunities for improvement. And when I say we, I mean collaborations between students, staff, and faculty. It's always been really collaborative. The recycling committee from right at the start was a multi-stakeholder committee. We have programs that started like composting programs. We were one of the first institutions in Quebec to have an on-site composting program and to start actively composting organics. We've had different versions of kind of collections of initiatives. We used to call it R4 Concordia when it was based out of Sustainable Concordia, and it included different waste reduction initiatives like the Dish Project. In 2014, we piloted this trashless office project we called the Low Waste Office, which we paired with providing compost to all kitchenettes, and we're pretty much wrapped that up. So that's having a big impact on our waste diversion. And we formally launched the Zero Waste Concordia program a couple of years ago with this idea that we needed like a new house and container for all of these initiatives that were started in all these different places and a way to continuously support it. So when we talk about the Zero Waste plan, there's definitely a list of strategies that I'll summarize later in a little bit, but what we're basically talking about also at the same time is a program that supports this stuff continuously through a team that is open, but also connected to facilities management, where a lot of the waste is managed, and that's where I work out of. So we've done consultations way back when in 2017 to find out what people wanted in terms of waste reduction, and we actually came up with zero waste because that was something that people felt strongly about, that zero waste is something that is achievable. and that we need a change in terms of our culture of how we handle materials on campus, how we consume materials. So those are things that got embedded into the concept of the program early on. So in terms of what our plan is basically made up of, its overarching objectives. It's a measurable plan. We're really trying to track our progress to zero waste, which means 90% of materials diverted from the landfill by 2039. And it also means 50% of reduction of materials per full-time equivalent person at the university by 2039, according to the baseline. So we're looking to do that by changing how we operate, but also really engage with the community. So waste management involves some cost savings and stuff, and that's important to try to embed in that so that we can sustain this different way of operating. It should be like a really positive experience for people, and people should be involved in how we reach that goal too. So we prioritize upstream waste reduction. So that means before materials come in, we're thinking critically about what we're consuming and how we can prevent the unnecessary stuff from coming in. And then we're also thinking about, do we have to send it to the conventional recycling, compost, trash streams, or can we be reusing more? Those are the things we're really prioritizing in this program and in this plan. And just generally, why zero waste? Probably a lot of you are familiar with this result that you get when you dig in the trash and you examine the contents. You can weigh them, and you'll find most of the materials are recyclable, compostable, and not very many are really technically supposed to go to the landfill. So even just starting from that premise, zero waste really makes sense. We've got a lot of initiatives right now, even though we're not active at the university. Over the years, we have accumulated a bunch of them. Some of them are on pause right now because the university is not active, but some of them are still doing a lot of online education, like Concordia Precious Plastic and the Center for Creative Reuse. We're still composting what we produce in terms of organics on campus. We have Zero Waste Week happening right now, so I encourage you all to connect with that, and we can share the link in the chat as well. We have a litter cleanup coming up this year. We thought that would be something we could still do this year with a lot of participation from wherever you are. So in terms of the plan, it really is split into three main categories. One is innovative solutions to waste reduction and diversion. So really exploring, going out there and testing new ideas and connecting with research and curriculum in that process. It's also about upstream interventions and circular economy. So we saw that diagram. It's really about thinking upstream, not after we produce the materials. And we're also looking at making sure we're up to par in terms of best practices. So are we doing all of this, the basic stuff that have been proven to work, that are done at other universities or in other contexts that are similar to universities? So I'm not going to go through every single strategy because I want to get to our conversation, but I really encourage you to check out the plan in the link. And just to point out a couple of interesting ones, we have this idea of collecting materials to a central location. We call it the sorting center, which really would give us the opportunity to play with the materials, to sort them, and then see what we can actually do locally with materials rather than sending them to recycling, which we know doesn't always yield an optimal result. We're looking at financial incentives as well. So how can we kind of put pressure on reducing waste by actually potentially charging for what we produce as different units or departments or tenants? We really want to embed experiential learning in there. I've got all these icons. I'm going to skip over them. They just kind of indicate what we thought were high impact projects, what were, cost implying projects. I'm not going to talk about that stuff today. In terms of upstream projects, we want to look at sustainable asset management. So things like mobile assets like furniture or different kinds of equipment. How can we reuse those things better? How can we identify opportunities to share assets better? How can we communicate that process really clearly to all Concordians? How can we reuse e-waste even is something we're looking at. And procurement obviously is a huge one. Our Center for Creative Reuse can turn into a furniture upcycling center with a tool literacy component. So we're really looking at educating people on how to participate in the upcycling. We're looking at coffee, beverages, and food containers, and can we create shareable container programs for that? That's something we're actively working on right now. blah, blah, blah. And in terms of best practices, we want to make sure our waste stations are up to par in terms of you always have every option at every waste station. Our low waste offices, we talked about not having a trash at every desk, really encouraging people to go to central sorting areas in their offices, making sure tenants are practicing recycling, composting, and even reducing their waste. So when I say tenants, I mean like a lot of the cafes and restaurants that rent space from us. They're high producers and they need to be involved, and they've started to get involved. So we've made some really good progress there. Looking at laboratories too is something we're just getting started in, and renovation and construction waste. Those are two huge areas of waste production, and events too. So there's obviously waste is produced everywhere, and you have to kind of look at each one independently. And you really have to look at it with the people who are responsible for those areas to think about how can we actually divert and reduce that waste. So that kind of leads me to the last thing I want to say before I pass the torch on, which is we really encourage you to connect with us so that we can collaborate on developing a version of the plan that works for where you're situated. So we did create this overarching concept, this overarching plan, because it makes sense as a whole, but we recognize that each area is going to need to work with us to generate ideas that work and fit for your area and the way your group works. So please connect with us and let's build a plan together. So you can reach out by email, or you can reach out to us by social media. zerowaste@concordia.ca. We'll go to my colleague Matt, and he's really wonderful and will help connect us with an opportunity to maybe have a town hall, let's say, with your department or your student group. Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Thanks so much, Basil.
No worries.
Yeah, I think it's really useful for us to start off with understanding some of that history and where we can go together. I know that Alice also has a couple of slides for us, and I'm really excited to also hear from you, Alice, about how you're defining sustainability and working towards zero waste in your own work.
Yeah, I will share my screen. Just 1 second. Can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, so well, thanks Meredith for the presentation, and thanks Faisal as well. I'm looking forward to hear more about the other guests today. So I'm a faculty in design and computation arts, and my area is materials, materiality, and social environmentally responsive cities and communities. I'm also the director of Meteor Institute Biolab, and I'm part of the new Canada Excellence Research Chair cluster in Next Generation Cities. And I'm also chair of the SOFA committee, Sustainability of Fine Arts Committee. And I think we have many members of the committee today with us. I saw, well, of course, Ariane, but I saw Anna and I saw Christine. So I will highlight these initiatives. So what I want to do is basically show a few examples of current research creation initiatives and their intersections to both research and the waste axis of the Sustainability Action Plan. And I think that what is key for me in terms of research creation and defining sustainability is that beyond, say, ecological balance, well, sustainability can be both environmental and social cultural. And I want to highlight the question of engagement and the question of ability that's embedded in the word sustainability. So basically, here, I just want to highlight a few initiatives. This is the Dust Agitator series, research creation project that highlights new potential scenarios for recycled glass in Quebec beyond its transformation into post-consumer products used in infrastructures and the construction industry. So the project is based on a series of residencies and glass facilities in both Quebec and Europe. And the project examines one fine and exhausted particle that's produced by the processing of glass in Quebec's recycling facilities. So this research in general intersects with artistic, political, ecological, and social consideration. And it looks at how materiality engaged in processes of circulation with sites, technology, and communities can provoke the emergence of new social and aesthetic relations, be it environment, events, objects, and so on. The next initiative I want to highlight is the work we do at the BioLab. So basically the Milieu Speculative Life BioLab is a hybrid research creation lab that develops and facilitates conceptual and material-based exploration around the changing status of life on the planet and its ties to the technosphere. And we adopt an interdisciplinary perspective to look at those issues. We work on bio-inspired processes and biocomposite materials. Here you see the latest piece that we did at the lab, which is called Fossilation. So Fossilation was presented at the Pompidou Center in February. It's a large bioplastic membrane that produces its own lighting system by harvesting residual energy from the building in order to transform it into electricity. So basically it's a kind of a zero waste installation. Next project initiative that I want to highlight, sorry for the poor picture, is called Sustainable Engagement and the Reuse of a Road Infrastructure. So we're working with CHEOPS, a large consortium on governance of infrastructure projects, and Pont-Jacques-Cartier Champlain Bridge, which is a branch of Infrastructure Canada. So the Champlain Bridge is being dismantled, and we are looking at how to create new proposals for the reuse of concrete and steel of the Champlain Bridge. So it's basically upcycling at large scale, and all the materials will be offered to community. So we're developing with different communities, and most specifically in Verdun, different proposal for the reuse of concrete and steel into new urban and artistic interventions in Montreal. And finally, one initiative that is really dear to me and probably of many members here, the Sustainability of Fine Arts SOFA Committee. So SOFA mandate is to support and promote the application of sustainability principles across fine arts and to make recommendation to the Sustainability Action Plan to guide initiatives and work with different committees across university. I won't name all the members, but many are present today. And we are currently working on the CARE project, the CARE guide. So the CARE project, Process and Material Considerations for Sustainability in Fine Arts, aims at targeting key issues at Concordia University relating to sustainable material use and thought methods, and to address these issues through a series of videos interviews with staff, faculty, and students. So all these interviews are in progress. They will be published soon online, and we are really looking forward to share this project with you.
Thank you so
So
much.
I think that's it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah, thank you. It's great to have such a clean snippet of so many research projects that are happening right now. So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna jump over to Ariane to pose the same question. Since you're also in facilities management and speaking to Sucker, can you tell us more about what sustainability means to you and how you guys are working towards zero waste?
Well, I often think about the sort of three spheres or the three pillars of sustainability. So the environment, the economy, and society. I've been involved in sustainability at Concordia for actually over 15 years now. I first got involved in 2006 when I think the second sustainability assessment coming out of Sustainable Concordia was released. And I've been involved ever since. And just a few years ago, got involved with Anna Timbodos as she started to open the Center for Creative Reuse here at the university. And when I think about the environmental sort of pillar of sustainability and what we do on campus is keeping good materials out of the landfill. So what we do is we collect materials that were headed for our dumpsters on campus, our trash compactors on campus, and we saw the potential in them and brought them into our material depot, which is in the Grey Nuns. You can see it sort of virtually in my background right now. I'm not on campus today, but we are still going to campus and continually collecting materials, because materials still move while the pandemic is going on. And so we put all these materials on display in sort of a store setting, but everything is free, and that's where the sort of economy comes in, is that we're saving not only Concordians, but we're saving Montrealers money. So we don't charge for the materials that we provide through the center. It's kind of a weird concept to charge people for technically what was considered trash. And it gets really tricky to start putting a value on something like as small as a button or a scrap piece of wood or something like that. So it's more about this gift economy, taking this value that we have and giving it back to our community, whether it's within the walls of Concordia or outside of that. And it's also about, well, looking at when you're about to purchase something on campus, hey, maybe Sucker has that. For instance, recently was a new staff member was about to press the checkout button on their Staples account and realized, hey, they have file folders over there at the center. So we grabbed a stack of file folders and they didn't have to buy that. And then the societal sort of piece is again connected to that gift economy, but helping people see the potential in what we already have. There are so many materials in the world right now. There was a recent report released in the Nature, I think it's a magazine or a publication, where scientists have now assessed that there's now more human-made material than there is biological material on this planet. So if you think about that, it's pretty significant. And so let's use what's already above ground rather than continuing to dig giant holes in the earth. Alice talked about the glass that she works with in her own research. There's so much glass already. I don't think we technically need to produce more glass. Like, we can just use what's already there. Same goes for things like aluminum. So yeah, when it comes to our sort of connecting with the societal one, is like just helping people see the potential in reuse, whether it's materials they have at home, materials we have at the university, materials they have in their own neighborhoods, and just trying to demystify that for everyone.
Thanks so much, Ariane. And thank you for introducing us today to the concept of that gift economy and exploring potential. I'm hoping that we will be able to dig more into that today. And I'm sure, Liz, you can do that a bit for us next, talking about what sustainability means to you, as well as what you've been doing in terms of zero waste. And yeah, it sounds like a very cool course that you've been teaching on that involves travel.
Thank you, Meredith, and thank you everyone so far for these amazing presentations. So my name is Liz, and I am a filmmaker who teaches in communication studies here at Concordia. And so the way I think about and use media is an invitation to collaborate and foster community. And so I also think of pedagogy that way. And I had this amazing opportunity to co-develop a course with a colleague in a different discipline, which is MJ Thompson. And we were invited by the high level, gave us this opportunity to invent a course that addressed a wicked problem. And so our wicked problem was, we decided, was waste. And this was a new topic for me in some respects. As a filmmaker, I have been addressing environmental racism in my work for over 15 years. So that was kind of my entry point. and in the last 10 years, really head on trying to think through climate change and climate disruption, and however we say this. And I was trying to think about how might I, as an individual, the more I learned, the more I started doubting myself as a media maker, inspired by people like Alice, who's really thinking about the materiality of our tools. Like, how contradictory is it for me to travel around the world telling stories, using microchips? You know, what are ways that I might not only choose to represent issues, but think about the very materiality of the tools I use to communicate. So thinking through a lot of this, MJ and I developed this class, and we wanted to use communication to, use the class to build community. So the idea was that we would kind of do this spectacle cycling journey through the city, camping in the city, cycling every day, zero waste methodology, but making visible of the wastegapes throughout the city. And my only expertise really in this was like kookiness, you know, it was like trying to create a kind of pedagogical spectacle. But it, like any other kind of course or media project, was an invitation and a prompt to begin thinking with people like Ariane, to begin thinking with people like Alice. It was, I didn't yet define, Meredith, what I think of sustainability, but I thought I would sort of define it, since everybody else already did it, as a methodology. And if we think of what are sustainable methodologies, then tapping into existing resources and reusing them in interesting, dynamic new ways was sort of the method of this class. So rather than think of myself as any kind of expert on waste per se, it was like, how could I tap into Faisal's, how could I get Faisal invested in this class? Which he did. So anyway, then COVID came about, and we realized that we wouldn't be able to complete this class, but we would actually design tours throughout the city, bike tours, so that people could do these DIY tours. And I'm actually just going to try to share my screen with you. Let's see if this works. So we developed 5 different tours for this. So rather than doing it together, we thought we could each do it alone. And we designed a course that was based on students stepping away from their computers, getting into the city around these working themes: waste waters, leftovers, waste values, food, dirt and scale, and waste aesthetics. And after this course, we are now in the process of turning this, it's actually live, turning this into an app, so that we could move from so that the course that we initiated through Concordia could also permeate itself through the city. So I think one of the really important things about sustainability is not just having events like this, where we're bringing communities together and thinking together, but also bridging the expertise between the city and the university. And so to summarize, it was just like a very quick one initiative. I'm really interested. I believe that an important part of sustainability is about cultivating community. The way that we change our practices, I've done a lot of research with this, with media and climate change. And if your friend is doing something or your family is doing something, it's a lot more likely that you will also want to do that. And so you asked us, what are the challenges of cultivating like sensitivity in our departments? And I think there's 3 primary challenges. I think time, making time to shift our behaviors. I think attention, you know, getting the attention of our students and our colleagues and our family and our policymakers, and this community. Like, when we feel that we are pleasurably in community with others is when we are most susceptible to changing behaviors, to trying new things. And so that was a lot of what we were trying to do with the cycling tours. Like, how could we actually have fun, be learning together, and imagining new ways of organizing ourselves and organizing waste. I'd better pause now so that I don't go overboard here. But I'm happy if any part of that was incoherent or unclear, I'm happy to address that in questions afterwards. And we're doing it again. I should just say, by the way, we have a part 2 this summer, which is called
fabulous.
Place Under Pressure. Okay, enough. Thank you, Meredith.
Well, I hope you'll put the name of the course in the chat so that anyone who's interested can have a chance to check it out. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that community really resonates with me as well. Running a volunteer coordination program at the university, community building has been the primary goal for me. Is how do we build that investment together, because we have so many reasons in a chaotic world to sort of be focusing elsewhere. And often that ends up isolating us both from each other and from these larger issues. So I love that piece about the joy that can be experienced in community, even when we are facing some pretty big problems. And with that sort of in mind, we do want to now open it up to everyone else who's in the room. So actually what we're going to do is I'm going to ask all of you to think about this question of what do you view as the biggest obstacles to integrating sustainability and waste management into your department. And we're going to take 60 seconds, and I'm just going to ask everyone in the room right now to type in the chat. When it hits a minute, I'm going to count down from 3, 2, 1. We're going to all hit send at the same time. And I just really want us to be inundated with these dreams and solutions and ideas that we are all sharing and coming up with, so that we can inspire each other. If you haven't had a chance to see your department in person yet, if you maybe are just someone who hasn't been involved in a specific department, maybe think about your own office space or your personal life. Those can also inspire us for approaching departments. So I'm going to give us 60 seconds to start typing. Please, everyone in attendance, panelists, watchers, join us for the next 60 seconds, and I'll let you know when time's up and we'll start sharing. Hey, Megan asked us to repeat the question, so I'm going to do that as people type. It's just, what do you view as the biggest obstacles to integrating sustainability and waste management into your department, whatever that sort of department might mean to you? Okay, thank you so much. I see that people have put in some great responses already. If you haven't finished typing up, now's the time to press send. I just want to talk about some of the highlights. Liz has said time, attention. Alice has agreed. The difficulty of sort of awareness and time in terms of creating commitments. Perception, Ariane has said, about zero waste being something that's difficult. Restructuring cultural, personal efforts. We're lucky at Concordia to have so many sort of international students, people from different places coming and joining us, but we all have different understandings of what zero waste or waste management looks like. Even for me, coming from Toronto, it was a learning experience on what could and could not be recycled in the city. Satoshi has said COVID made our offices unnecessary. Campus is now virtual. Would this change the waste issue significantly? Are we just waiting to go back to normal, or is it necessary to take the current situation as part of normal in post-pandemic era? I think that's such a great question, and that really leads into one of the questions that I had for our panelists, which is, many of you really integrated art and innovation into your zero waste work. And I really want to think of, with what's coming next, how can creativity play a critical role in approaching our institutional and community relationships to waste, even for those of us who may not think of ourselves as artists? And maybe Ariane, because you are part of the Creative Reuse Center, I'll have you start answering first.
All right. So actually, just before COVID, we opened a new space that had been initiated by a arts and science student called The Shed. And its intention was to demystify tool use. So getting people comfortable, no matter what their tool experience it was, whether it was zero or higher, was to make them feel comfortable enough to use tools, whether it was hand or power tools, to be able to turn materials that didn't have any potential and turn them into something that was valuable to them. And so, and that's where I think we start to blur the line of artist or artisan or craft person, is that anybody can make something if they're taught in a way where they feel really comfortable with the tools, no matter whether it's woodworking or other kinds of tools. We also do a lot of work with sewing machines and other kinds of machines and tools. So it's just really making people feel comfortable and safe and confident to use the tools, to take what they have around them to turn into something new, or to extend the life. We've been working a lot on that lately, is mending. So how do we bring back that idea of mending something, of fixing something that's maybe slightly broken, but with a little, a little stitch here or a new screw there, it would actually last much longer.
Thanks so much, Ariane. And I want to encourage our other panelists to jump in. You are welcome to feed off each other and not wait for me. It looks like Alice, you have some thoughts.
Well, thanks, Ariane, for the intervention. And I think my comment about that will echo Liz's approach about the question of community and the question of dialogue. I think, well, this is kind of key. I think artists are absolutely fantastic, artists and designers, to at asking like critical questions and at putting together speculative scenarios, which are not necessarily always scalable or replicable in, I would say, the industrial sense of things, or like if we take the sustainable development lens. However, I think research creation and art in general has the potential to bridge systems of different nature and scale. If we think of Liz waste tours, the question of experiential learning, and I remember in one of my class critical materiality, when we were like still in person, we visited the JR Marcotte wastewater treatment plant, but looking at those waste infrastructure, like in person, face to face, looking at where waste actually ends in the city and creating those links with different stakeholders, infrastructural, community-based, and so on, really makes a difference. So bringing the university outside the university is key to me in terms of creating new possibilities and scenarios.
Maybe I could say something. This just came to mind when Alice was speaking, is the potential to defamiliarize. I am just like in awe of this project that she's initiating of like using the materiality of that bridge, this iconic infrastructure that we don't even think of is a is an infrastructure made up of cement that what happened. We think about the new bridge, but we don't necessarily think about where all of that waste is going. And so this idea of her engaging people in using that concrete is a defamiliarization where it completely disrupts this idea of what happens after, the narrative of like not only the concrete and what is concrete and where does concrete come from and what does it do to our wetlands, but also like, well, if I wasn't the artist working with this, where would that concrete go? So it kind of, again, is a prompt to a whole set of questions that I may not have thought about. And I think that, you know, the artist is like the trickster who brings a set of unpredictable questions, or who helps us defamiliarize logics that are tired and that we need to move past. And I love these 4 things that Alice said: community and dialogue, speculative scenarios, experiential learning and practice. I mean, these are fantastic. Thank you, Alice, for kind of framing it that way.
Thanks so much. Faisal, did you want to sort of share any of your thoughts in terms of, these approaches of innovation and projects of defamiliarization that Liz has so rightly named?
Yeah, those are really amazing points. I mean, this whole process of connecting people with what happens with the stuff they produce, where they came from before, I find like a really fascinating question, because it asks, I mean, I end up asking like, where are we trying to get with that idea? Like, it's something I don't reflect on too often, because I kind of automatically think like, well, we should all know where everything we consume comes from and goes. And then when I think about that realistically, that sounds horrible. That actually sounds overwhelming and paralyzing, right? And so it's like, what is the goal with like connection and understanding? Is it to have everybody know everything, or is it to have like the people who are kind of responsible for these things to really understand it and then be encouraged to think differently about it? And I think like what we're doing at Concordia, what people are doing with various projects is really amazing, and starts to open up the doors in these directions and having people connect more. But yeah, this whole idea of like life cycle assessment and everything, right? Like how many people need to know the life cycle assessment of every item they consume? I mean, that also sounds like paralyzing, right? Like, can you imagine going to the store and then being like, well, should I buy this thing? And it's bad for the water, but this thing is good for like, you know, greenhouse gas emissions. Like, and that's why I think a lot of times like systems have to kind of make the choices for people, but we still have to connect people with knowledge and understanding. And that's that I think is just like an active problem to be working on, like a really cool, interesting challenge.
Can I respond to that? I think, thank you, Faisal, for this intervention. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I think it echoes really well what Liz mentioned about defamiliarizing. I can say it in English. I can't pronounce it. Whatever, and that word. And but actually, to me, it comes back to this question of visibility and invisibility of waste. And like when you think about like life cycle assessment and knowing everything about where it comes from, it can be like extremely overwhelming for a lot of people. And for me, because I mean, you can't know everything, and I think that like there's always the pitfall of guilt when you think about sustainability, of like, okay, like, what am I doing? Is it okay? What have I done? And I think everyone have experienced it like all the time. But there is this balance and this interesting tension to explore between, effective relations with matter and effective relations with matter. So how can you make the invisible visible? And I think that, just like if I can speak from a very personal point of view, like my research and practice completely shifted when I ended up in a dump in Belgium. Just because you are surrounded with your waste. Well, not my personal waste, but like human waste in general. So basically experiencing and seeing what is produced, it really changes your attitude, because you're facing this. And sometimes I'm thinking that, waste infrastructure, when you think about it, like politically and geographically, they're not visible. You think about the JR Marcotte wastewater treatment plant. It's at the east end of Montreal. You can't see it. Waste sites are up on the Couronne Nord, on the north shore of Montreal, south shore of Montreal. So you don't have access to your waste. You put it in a bin and you hope for the best. So there is this thing about that I always thought about. I was just like, okay, how can we make our production systems and leftover systems within campus visible? Not because it's ugly, but just because this visibility brings awareness and brings engagement because you're accountable at one point.
Thank you so much, Alice. Yeah, it's really, really interesting to hear about this, like the balance of tangibility and what we're seeing and physically relating to. And it looks like, Zainab, you had your hand up, and I'm sort of interested in hearing from you because you referenced being in engineering and yeah, that balance between economic, which is in some ways abstract and in some ways has such a deep tangibility to it, of course, versus the environment. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you in this perspective of how we're sort of working with our waste.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for this great presentation. I want to see the sustainability in Concordia from another angle. I was in many of these kind of sustainability gatherings, but I think the engineering, not like urban planning or environmental engineering, the engineering like Gina Cody, aerospace, mechanical, electrical engineering, they don't feel any relation between themselves and sustainability. But I think it is the point that I know we have a lot of waste in the urban sites, in the city, and these are the visible waste. And this is less, this is the small amount of the waste that threaten the environment. But the invisible waste from public, the waste that public can't see it because it is in the factories, in the shops, in the places that far from the sea, the public site are happening always, and they have a great impact on environment. And we have many engineers in Concordia that working on their projects without any awareness about how they should act to be more environmental friendly. They do the environmental friendly activity when they are working on their own projects. But maybe this is my perception, but I think the participation of the engineering part with this sustainability plans is very small, and maybe in engineering the most important issue is being economic and being fast, these things, and the environmental aspect is very like luxury thing there, because it is related to the growth of a economy. It is related to employment, to these things, that it is more important for a country than environmental luxury things. And I think it is very important to have a plan to lift the awareness in engineering sector. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that's like a really wonderful point. I've been very lucky with my program. We've had quite a few of our sustainability ambassadors be engineering students. And I think what engineering students can bring to conversations around sustainability is so important when we're talking about building community, is building relationships, but also engineers hold such a potential in terms of building community through how physical spaces are designed. And so, yeah, that's, I think, a great point, and really brings back to that question of how are we building this further into our departments. It looked like Matt had something to add as well, so I'd love to hear from him. And then Arian looked very excited earlier, so.
I want to say, first of all, what a great turnout. This is awesome. It's really cool to hear just a bunch of different perspectives that I'm not generally exposed to. So thanks for that. I think a couple points, going back to the guilt topic. I've said it before, so I'm the zero waste coordinator for Zero Waste Concordia. And this is, I've said it before, but this is my job and I have a hard time with it. I think about this all the time, more often than I care to admit. And I even sometimes look and I'm like, what do I do with that? I look at my recycling on Wednesdays and think, oh God. And so just give yourself, a bit, my suggestion would be to give yourself a bit of a break, because I think part of one of the things that's very challenging is you can't control larger recycling systems and whether or not they're succeeding or failing. And it's not a reason to not participate anyhow, but also it's on companies to make materials that are compostable and recyclable, because if what you have is trash and you ultimately get stuck disposing it, now you feel guilty, but that's not your fault, And I think that what's really interesting to go back to Zainab's point is that talking about engineers and whatnot, and I've been really grateful through the low waste office to go to lots of different areas in the university and just hear different people's perspectives in different departments and how they view sustainability. And the thing with sustainability is, for it to be real and sustainable, able to sustain itself, you need to have everybody at the table, or else it's just what we have now. Some voices are represented and some aren't, and that's just not reality, And so sustainability to an engineer means something different than someone interested in sustainable finance and someone interested in geography, water treatment, social justice work. And I think that that's something that that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It gets me really excited to hear what it means to people and why they like it, or why they think we're failing, because I want to hear that too. I think it's really important to know where we can do better. And yeah, so thanks again. This is really cool to hear everyone's stuff. So
thanks so much, Matt. I think that actually leads really well into my next question. I think you've pointed out that going zero waste can often be envisioned as either a purely operational project or an individual one that leads to those feelings of guilt or helplessness. And that can be, turning, is your job to turn off the lights or bring reusable bags to the grocery store? Is that just facilities lowering the temperature in buildings? So yeah, a question I wanted to pose to everyone is, how do we foster these relationships between community members that can utilize a combination of our operational, research, curriculum, and community sectors on campus? Because there is so much amazing work happening, but we can often get stuck in those silos of departments rather than collaboration.
So Meredith, just to recap, you're talking about how can we collaborate more effectively? Is that a
yeah, what are some our strategies that we can use to really be building more relationships between the operational, research, community sectors?
Right, definitely. I mean, for me, I'm really excited that we're developing this sustainability living lab platform and funding program, and I would really like to see that grow into a community and kind of a dynamic space that lives in, you know, the Loyola College, as well as like all these other areas that, you know, will be really important stakeholders, like the ambassadors program. You know, I think volunteers coming in who are passionate about sustainability are students at the same time, and they're taking classes, and, you know, professors are connected to them. So just like the more we kind of embed these projects and objectives into existing organizations, and find like events to bring people together to talk about how we can collaborate and prompt people with challenges and questions, you know, I think that's our role too, like as a campus living lab concept. Like we're really trying to pose the sustainability plan and the zero waste plan as a problem that not just like we have the template, we have the map. Really don't. We have some lines on a piece of paper. We have a bunch of words and a bunch of ideas in people's heads. Some things we've tried out, many things that we know we want to do, that we have an idea of some sticking points, so we can elaborate on those things and we can encourage people to really test things out and open up the space for people to identify new problems. And because it's not like I know all the problems too, and that's really why it's got to be generative as a collective, right? Like we have to use all of this group and this energy and this power that we have who are interested. So I'm really interested in exploring these alternative collective models for advancing the cause. I think we kind of have to evolve, sort of, you know, like we can't go top down or just bottom up. It's got to be something else, like a new version of collective work.
Thanks so much, Faisal. Yeah, I'd love to sort of hear Liz respond to that, and then Christine. Thanks for checking in the chat, but you're absolutely invited to jump in once Liz has. Excited to hear from you too.
Well, I think, you know, it is really overwhelming at times. And I think, like, for me, the biggest remedy in moving beyond a sense of feeling overwhelmed at an individual basis is thinking towards that collective possibility that Faisal is speaking to. And it's really the only way forward to create pressures, you know, around the larger systemic waste issues. So figuring out how we convene is a huge challenge. Faisal said there's so many communities at Concordia. It's like, this is really instructive, what you're doing right here, which is beautiful facilitation of a space where we're enforcing. Like, I was almost thinking when you said operationalize, I kind of wanted to take 3 steps back and turn that into relationalize. It's like, how can we make the systems at Concordia be responsive to our value systems? And it's super tricky. Like, I'm just going to share, I really liked Alice kind of sharing that grounded experience of being in the landfill. So for me, just to share it was really challenging to teach an interdisciplinary course. You have no idea the amount of additional labor it takes to move outside of our silos and our infrastructures that all have these kind of systems that are well oiled and worked. But like Megan knows this with food delivery, it's like once you try to sort of push outside of these well coordinated systems, it's a lot of work to kind of foster the sort of flexibility that we need in order to be more responsive to the problems that confront us. So it's like, it really is, I guess I'm, you know, in community, I really just embrace what Faisal says, is like, how can we get better at flexible pathways of communications so that we can both kind of build our relationality, our familiarity with each other and the possibilities, but also be pressuring the systems that really have not been responsible for the bulk of waste. And I mean systems like, you know, transnational corporations that are based on disposability, to also the systems here at Concordia, you know, that make the work of somebody like Megan Clark, you know, who's trying to redistribute food, challenging. Like, we need to get behind Megan and these communities, you know, these initiatives that are university, but also get behind accountability at those bigger. And I don't think we can do it unless we have strong relations and strong pathways for communication, which is why this is amazing, and why Meredith, I just have to do a shout out, why strong facilitation in Zoom environments goes such a long way. Thank you already for doing such a beautiful job today.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to hear from Christine at this point. If you can give us a little introduction about your relationship to Concordia, so we know where you're sharing from.
Yeah, hey, it's super nice to be able to speak up and join the conversation. I was invited to come by through Alice and Arian. I'm also working with Anna Timbotos on the CARE project. I also recognize Megan from a course that we took together, Food and Sustainability and Sociology. So I'm a fine arts student who's also taking a minor in sociology. So when we start thinking about corridors, or at least the separation between departments, this sort of thing is really interesting to me because I kind of experience it on a day-to-day level, working within two different departments, but also being in fine arts, how there's so many different departments even within that. So it's something I find really interesting, both in terms of like the architecture of space, which is something I have researched through the space planning committee in the fine arts 10-year space plan, where I think one of the solutions to connecting some of these departments is perhaps through some kind of mobile system. That's why I think Liz's project in terms of using bikes and actually going to different sites is a really interesting method that I think could be integrated on campus. You know, I'm really curious to hear more about the Sustainable Ambassadors program, because I think that this also needs to be a role. I think that part of it is that people become really isolated within their units, within their space, and this is kind of a political thing in terms of like how the university is structured. So if we want to make things more social and conversational, or perhaps bring things to people's awareness visually, you know, not everyone has the guts to just go in and walk into the recycling area of Concordia. I'll tell you, the door's open. You can go in there. Like, no one really questions it. It's not got a great smell, but you can certainly just pop in there. No one's told me to leave before. But all that to say is that, you know, I think there could be something really interesting to make use of like trolleys or like mobile structures that move between what might be a sort of socially architectural structure to like limiting, you know, how we interact with one another because of doors being closed or locked even.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's really great to hear from the different perspectives. Alice, you looked like you wanted to jump in, so I'd love to hear from you.
Well, yeah, very quickly, and I think it echoes, Christine, you picked up a little bit on the question of relationality that Liz brought in, and I want to discuss that also, but perhaps from another perspective. But I think that, you know, to make all those sustainable initiatives really effective, there needs to, you know, we need to emphasize the question of fun, enjoyment, and pleasure in practice. And, you know, switch the perspective of like, okay, sustainability must be a baseline criteria, and switch it to the perception of a plus value for everyone, and an enjoyable plus value. Because, I mean, there needs to be something more to sustainable practices just to outweigh all the other practices. It's not something that we can achieve by just like pushing on people's heads. So, and it needs to be like something that can trigger new forms of collaborations, new form of practices, new challenges among students and research opportunities. And I think the plan is pretty amazing in order to foster all that. But I think that, you know, this is something that we sometimes forget, the question of pleasure of practicing and practicing sustainably. So
thank you. Yeah,
I think Arian wants to add something.
I kind of want to connect back to what Zainab was talking about earlier and the conversation now, and how we start to really deeply foster the relationships between our faculties. I find oftentimes we work, the faculties work in their own silos when there's really amazing potential in each for cross collaboration. Like, for instance, in the biolab that Alice works in, is there material potential there that can be applied in engineering? I think back to our earlier conversation where we were talking about, well, the bridge, the old Champlain Bridge coming down and the bits and pieces of that and the potential there. Concordia's just recently purchased a bunch of buildings on Lower Guy, next to the Great Nuns building. What's the plan for those buildings? Are we demolishing them or are we deconstructing them? And how are the bits and pieces, whether it's the concrete that Liz mentioned earlier, or even the structural supports of that building, being explored by students, by faculty, by staff, as we revision those buildings, whether to keep them, to renovate them, whatever it might be, is truly a living lab experience to go in and say, okay, well, how can we take this material of this building and either use it in the same building in its renovation or elsewhere on campus? Maybe it becomes a new material for someone else on campus. So really, like, going deep and looking at the potential of how this can apply to research curriculum, and breaking down those silos between our faculties.
Faisal, please jump in.
Yeah. I wanted to respond to Alice's point about fun because that really resonates with me. It always has. Maybe not the first couple of years I started working. I think I felt a lot of pressure to be really serious and like solve this problem. And then I quickly realized that like the waste problem at Concordia is a long haul game, and that it can be depressing or difficult, and that you can take on personally a lot of the sense of responsibility of what's going on if you're actively working on it, like Matt kind of talked about. And the best counter I've had for that is what Alice is talking about, is you have to play, you have to have fun. It gives you so much fuel to kind of get through, I think, what can be really dark and difficult or just seem impossible. So fostering that, I think, is really important. We didn't include it in like our theme, but I think we should, like in our zero waste program, I think there should be a strong emphasis on that somehow, on, play, surprise. Like we talk about innovation, I think, a lot in the plan. I think that was like a buzzword at Concordia a few years ago that kind of like has really latched on, and it's everywhere, right? Innovation. And it's a safer word because it's not too like playful and whatever. It can be really serious innovation, but I think playfulness maybe is more important. So thank you for that, Alice. And then kind of connecting to that, Christine, I really love this image of you walking into the recycling center, because I've experienced that too. Like when I started, like that EV building recycling area, right? Like, and just generally, like there is that possibility of just kind of like stumbling, and it's kind of surprising. And that is a moment where you're like suddenly transported. You're like, this is what's happening here. Like, what is this place? Who are these people? What are their lives like? What are the materials coming through here? And so I just pictured like, what if that was just transparent? Like literally, like literally it wasn't a, opaque door. Like you could actually see what was happening there. And since we have this plan, this sorting center plan at Concordia of like deliberately building something that does what a loading dock currently does for materials, what if we made that sorting center totally like visible, either through like actually like clear walls or cameras and stuff? I think that idea is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly and then we'll have Alice and Liz take over for us. But yeah, to speak to the Sustainability Ambassador Program, I think for us, like it is a student peer-to-peer education program involving volunteers on campus. It's quite a young program, and unfortunately we have had to shut down most of what we do over the pandemic because it's hard to do on-campus volunteering when none of us can safely be on campus. But we are pretty excited for what September is going to bring for the program. We'll be sort of launching a revised version that is really going to hope to break down some of this disconnection between departments, and just thinking about how play and joy is something that is really integral to the program for me. Designing the structure, Audrey and Marie Brown's pleasure activism is, a big inspiration in the notion that we should feel like joy and care and celebration in that process of finding new solutions and sort of moving beyond our own imagination to incorporate each other's. And I think the ambassador program has been pretty exciting for that, because we've been able to connect students from all across campus rather than within a specific department. And I really hope that we can continue that. And I'm sort of interested, I think, too, in Faisal talking about, like feeling needing to be really serious at the beginning and then realizing it's the long haul. Universities have like a strange temporality in that some of us are here for very long times. And as we understand the institutional structure, we learn how long things can take. But for so many of us who are undergraduate students, time is so fleeting when you're only here for 3, 4, 2 years for a master's, et cetera. And so building that connection across differing experiences of time at the university, I think, is a really big barrier that we are trying to get at, I think, with plans that have context and are sort of pushing to the future. But I'd love to hear more from Alice now.
Maybe Liz wants to go first. I just spoke, so I want to be okay. So basically, I just want to, I was reading the chat, and I was thinking about this question of obstacles and silos and the need for more liaison. And I think it's extremely important. But also I want to highlight the necessity of creating spontaneous links, and how people are very often super open-minded. Ariane just mentioned this question of, okay, can the biolab merge with something with engineering? And this just happened a few months ago, where I discovered a few labs in the basement of the EV, and I got super excited because these are all the smart materials lab. And we just decided to say, well, okay, we work with bioplastic, and these researchers work with MREs, which are basically a polymer magnetic based materials. So we are currently exploring the possibility of making those polymers more sustainable across different reactive materials. But these things happen spontaneously. Some other things don't, and hence the need for ambassadors and more liaison and more communications. But I just want to say that it's these worlds of waste, matter, engineering, arts, design are not completely waterproof to one another. So sometimes this kind of necessity of just knocking at a door and saying what are you doing in your third basement is really necessary. The usual old school connections that you can create with people. So that's what I wanted to say. So I think that it highlights the importance of creating maybe gathering spaces or showcase of different disciplinary initiatives as part of the plant also.
Is that okay, Meredith, if I add something? Okay.
Yes, please join in.
So I think it's true. There's something to Matt's question about understanding the obstacles that's also sticking with me. And to build on that is also sharing when it works well. Because what I was saying is, just in doing this Wastegapes course, there were so many challenges of even literally just getting students from every discipline across the university enrolled. This put weight and stress on the administrators. There were there's a whole kind of wonky network. And I think what we need to do is rehearse, pilot, like try out kind of small interventions and then analyze them. I know Satoshi is also doing one of these wicked classes. And so like Satoshi, like we need to analyze what has been challenging, how did we resolve it, how can we be kind of more flexible in doing this. So I think rehearsal always comes to mind. What Alice said is, spontaneity, which opens things up, but then we also have to reflect on, okay, what worked, what didn't work, who's bearing the weight of this innovation, keeping labor, being aware of at whose cost. So I just wanted to say, Matt, like we have to keep asking that question. And I wanted to call out Taylor for, thank you, Taylor, for bringing up like the student perspective on that, because I think that's super, super important. I only know really the faculty challenge of kind of merging expertise. But then I also really loved a couple words that I wanted to bring forth that I also heard from Faisal, which was the word transparent. And, one of the things about working in waste, or like this little, experience I had in working in waste throughout the city, is the lack of transparency. Like many of us know that, there's a lot of profit to be made off of the waste industry. And there's a desire to hide a lot of how waste works throughout the city. And, there were plenty of opportunities where I showed up naively on a bike, to major waste facilities that really would have preferred that I was nowhere around. And they were quite hostile. And so we also need to understand the sort of darker side of how a lack of transparency can breed systems of profit that want nothing to do with the enthusiastic energy of students and educators showing up at their sites. So yeah, transparency feels like something, that should go almost hand in hand with that zero waste aspiration. And and literacy. It's like literacy, that's kind of gets back to what Alice was talking about with like the making visible, the being embodied. How does this help us kind of build these literacies?
Thank you so much, Liz. That really reminds me in some of the workshops that we've been giving over the years for the Sustainability Ambassador Program has included this sort of the problem scenario from CBC Marketplace, talking about how when they did send plastic bags out to be recycled in BC, which is like lauded for their recycling in Canada, only one made it to actually being recycled. One was dumped in a landfill and one was like burned. And sort of the corporate response to why it hadn't made it through to recycling in the ways that the companies had sort of promised was that there wasn't enough of an economic interest in buying the recycled materials. And so when it is only economy that's leading our movement towards zero waste, we do sort of get stuck in these dead ends of lack of transparency, because profit can be such an influence. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's such an important point, and in some ways is where we can play around with it, because we're at least have some opportunities to not be entirely influenced by profit. And I'd love to hear from Satoshi now to talk about, some maybe the course that Liz has referenced and some of your thoughts on this problem.
Sorry, I don't want to talk about the course that much, even though it is a wicked program. I want to bring up my experience from my climate course. I taught a society and climate change course last fall. And it's been really rewarding for me to hear students' ideas about what they can do to counter against the climate change, including waste reduction and so forth. But I think students have loads of ideas and practices, and they stimulate with each other through their Facebook page or tweet or whatever. And this is really tremendous kind of asset we have. And we have to really break the isolation among students because we lost the campus. How we can really bring the campus back is through the internet. So we can really encourage students to exchange ideas, and we can really create a competition or even the festival of how people do waste reduction at home and how they do energy saving at home and how they do climate action, that is how to reduce carbon emission and other things. And I think that we have to really stimulate students' engagement through the chat and all these important ways of communication, so that students can really have this sense that they're still connected to campus and connected to the actions that is happening on campus. So I think I want to emphasize what we can do at the right now and the pandemic. There are so many other things that we can do, and students actually can have fun and stimulate each other. I think this is a very important way to move forward under this condition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that really comes back to what has been said about notions of experiment and play and practice. What people are doing at home and trying to make it through can be such good places to start that journey and figure out what fails before we try and bring it to a larger scale. So listening to all these ideas and attempts is so important. And I see that there's a question on seeing more on-site remanufacturing happening on campus. Concordia Precious Plastics Project is a student initiative hoping to address plastic and how to turn that into 3D materials that can be reused. But what about sort of post-consumer fabric or glass? Maybe this is something, Faisal, you can speak to, and then perhaps Arian, if you have anything to add.
I mean, that's a really good question, Anna. I think there isn't an answer yet, I guess, on whether we can or can't do anything, but we could certainly try. I think that would be, really a really good kind of project to try to nurture at Concordia, create the space for people to experiment with that, use the practices that are out there or innovate new ideas. And so that is one of the things we're actively working on trying to acquire, is like a space that's sort of modular in that people can come in and test out these new concepts and see if they can kind of break the barriers and push local recycling further. But yes, I have no idea. We certainly have materials that we could use. We certainly have fabrics, right? Anna, you know all about the fabrics we've got at Concordia. And glass, I mean, I know we would have that in our recycling stream. I'm not sure where else, but probably.
Yeah, I think if I just talk a little bit about why I was mentioning these particular items, there are materials that are such a big problem in municipal waste streams. So as Concordia is like a piloting testing ground, how can we look at like small scale ways to solve the local recycling problems by doing more on-site things? So CP3 is a great example of potential for that could use the plastic that's found on campus to remodel and remake for a material to be then used again on campus. But like fabric and in particular is one of the biggest contributors to the landfill. It's not a huge material found on campus necessarily, but I do think that there's like definitely a problem to solve. And how can we use this platform of the action plan, not just to address the streams that we know are coming out of each of the buildings, but to really think about remaking the waste system in general and piloting ways to impact that on a local level. Like, we should think about Concordia's system in this plan as a way that would apply to a municipal or a larger global scale, and work sort of through that process and use the minds that we have and the incredible enthusiasm and knowledge from our students and from our whole community. And I love hearing about all of the different pieces that we bring today, but also just, the raw, unbridled like desire and passion to solve and to put work in to make changes. So
thanks so much, Anna. I think that is a really good place to end as we're running out of time. And I think that, yeah, that's such a great place to end in terms of what we've discussed today and what we've been able to learn, especially about Liz and Alice's work in terms of integrating students, but also engaging with these other waste streams that are happening off campus. So I think we'll try and send out an email with some more resources after the workshop as a thank you to everyone, so you don't have to go find everything yourself. But I did want to finish off with another question for all of us who are in attendance to answer and type into the chat, which is just that we want to be bringing our best practices and approaches to the zero waste plan. But what are approaches or initiatives to zero waste that you have seen happening that have inspired you? So I'd really love to see, as people are heading out, just maybe a quick link or reference to, yeah, what's inspired you towards zero waste.
That could also be a great follow-up, Meredith, that you could facilitate, you know, to actually just hear each other speak to one example, like from another campus or another community that seems to have worked and how we might adapt it. Or so it's a great prompt, even if we don't have time to discuss them.
I think we have so much to learn from each other. So it would be so wonderful to keep that conversation going. And I'm hoping at least we can leave each other today with the tiniest taste of what more we can look forward to. So I'll give everyone 60 seconds to throw that in the chat before we finish up with our thank yous.
Thanks, Meredith. And perhaps as people are contributing to the chat, we'll just thank you for doing such a stellar job moderating here today, and all the panelists and attendees who joined in the conversation, either in this space or in the chat. It's just been so great to hear all of the ideas. It did make us think that, oh, should have had a whiteboard for this, like a kind of Miro, and you could see all the kind of post-its and colors. But we will be sure to share the chat history with all of you. And since we're in a meeting, I'm pretty sure you could save it for yourself as well, just so you have access to that, as there's so many great suggestions and links coming out. So I'll pass it back to you, Meredith, for the final word. But just on behalf of ForSpace, I wanted to thank you all for being in this space with us here today. It was great to hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much to Anna, Douglas, and the ForSpace for hosting us. I really want to thank Faisal, Liz, Alice, and Arian for really engaging in this conversation and sharing with us the many projects that are already happening that you are really pulling forward, but also helping us, think of what Liz has said as sustainability as methodology and what we can learn from you and from the zero waste plan to keep going forward. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today. And thank you everyone for attending, and for those of you who jumped in. It's so exciting to just hear from other people in terms of where their perspectives are. So thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day. If you're in Montreal, enjoy the last hopeful snow of the season. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.